Chapter 7. No lights, no drums, no problem. Ever since the talent show a few months prior, my drum set sat broken in my room. Several more pieces were lost or broken when my brother and his friend brought them back to the house. The cymbal stands were barely working anymore, the bass drum legs didn't support the weight of the toms, and the chain for the bass drum pedal completely snapped. Basically, my drums were a mess. But that wouldn't stop me from playing. I had a temporary solution. I propped the drums against my wall for support. One side of the bass drum leaned on my back bedroom wall so it could support the weight of the toms leaning against it. I wedged my cymbal in between one of the toms and the wall vertically. This would serve as my hi-hat and my crash. My floor tom wasn't functional at all, and now I had to kick my bass drum instead of using the pedal. It was all pretty horrible, and I knew it was time to get a new drum set. Unfortunately, it wasn't the right time to ask for one. Life at home was getting really hard about now. I could tell more than ever that my mom was really struggling to pay the bills. We constantly had our electric turned off because we were behind on payments. Sometimes we went a few days without lights, so we sat around and used candles after sunset. We had our gas turned off a few times as well. Luckily, I don't remember it ever being in the dead of winter, which would have made it unbearably cold. I even remember going the whole summer of 1986 without a phone. My brother and I used to tell our friends that my mom shut it off on us because we used it too much and that we didn't appreciate it. But that was just a cover-up. Even with all these financial problems, life at home was still great. We loved each other and always took care of each other, and we didn't need material things to make us happy. I remember coming home from school every day and finding a picture my mom drew waiting on the steps for me. She was a great artist. It always had little sayings like, "You're the world," or "I love you to the moon," with little pictures of a moon on it. When I saw things like this and the love my mom had for us, none of that financial stuff mattered. Still, I knew it killed her inside to have her sons go through it. But I wouldn't have traded my childhood with my mom and brother in Yukon for anything. As corny as it sounds, we didn't need lights. We had love. So for Christmas and my birthday that year, I didn't have the heart to ask for a big present like new drums. Somehow, I knew my mom would sacrifice something else to get them, and I couldn't do that to her. Instead, I knew I was going to receive confirmation in the spring of 7th grade, and I could ask my sponsor to get me my drums. In the Catholic religion, confirmation is the last of the 4 initial rites after baptism, penance, and Holy Communion. For confirmation, a candidate picks a confirmation name and someone to sponsor him or her. And that sponsor acts like almost a godparent, someone who is an outstanding Catholic who can guide you in faith. Naturally, I picked my cousin Joey from Boston. I think Joey was the furthest thing from a good Catholic as one can get. During his summer visits with his sister Jody, he always had some new illegal scheme he was up to. One time, Joey took me to Times Square to buy a cell phone on a stolen credit card. Mind you, this was the 80s and way before cell phones were an everyday item. Back then, they cost thousands of dollars and were only for the mega rich. They also weighed about 20 pounds. When he tried to make the purchase, the store owner immediately called the cops because he knew it was a stolen credit card. My cousin and I had to run top speed through Times Square to avoid getting arrested. I was probably 10 years old at the time, but it didn't matter. I always looked up to him, and that's who I wanted for my confirmation sponsor. It was tradition for a sponsor to buy a pretty big gift in celebration of a young Catholic finishing his sacraments. And I had just the present in mind. I went to Sam Ash Music and picked out a brand new drum set. I still didn't know much about the different brands of drums or what was good and what wasn't. I basically picked the biggest set they had on display. A 7-piece Tama Swing Star. It was gorgeous. It just so happens that it was burgundy red, the exact color of my old drum set. The one problem was the price tag, $799. I didn't really have a great concept of money yet, but I knew that was a lot. I only hoped it wasn't too much for my cousin to spend. I told my mom, and she thought it was way too much. She said that I should just ask Joey for money towards the drums, which I thought was a good idea, I guess. Still, deep down, I was hoping he would get the whole set for me. So I continued to play on my propped up, broken down drums for the next few months, anxiously awaiting my confirmation. I went at least once a week to Sam Ash Music to look at the drums. I would bring my friends and show them the kit I was going to get for confirmation. In May of 1987, at the end of the day of my confirmation, my cousin Joey gave me an envelope just before he, my uncle, and my cousin Jody drove back to Boston. I was exploding and wanted to open it immediately, but my mom made me wait until they left. Once they pulled away, I ripped that thing open as fast as I could, already figuring out how I would pick the drums up later that day. To my disappointment, there was only $100 in the envelope. Looking back, of course, that was a very generous gift, and it would have been insane for him to give me an $800 present. But I didn't understand that then, and I was crushed. I really thought I was going to be able to buy my drums. Instead, I wasn't even halfway there yet. My mom told me to put my money in a safe place and start saving up the rest, which I thought was next to impossible. How was I going to save another $700? I even contemplated selling my comic book collection, which I started back when I was 5 years old. I had a lot of major Marvel issues, but I knew it wasn't the right time to sell them. My brother and I always said we would probably sell our collections to buy a house one day. I remember staring at my poster of Eric Carr every day and asking it, how will I ever be a great drummer like you if I don't even have a real drum set to play on? I decided that I needed to get a job. But who was going to hire a 13-year-old kid? I went to all the local pizzerias and asked if they needed any help. Finally, when I went to the last one on the outskirts of my neighborhood, they hired me. I was going to be the pizza delivery boy and hand-deliver pizza on my bike. I even convinced my good buddy Scally to come along with me most nights. This, along with the tip money that I would make being an altar boy, was my source of income to put towards my drums and my dreams. Around this time in 7th grade, I started to realize that my friends were starting to catch up to me in size, which told me I wasn't going to be this giant like everyone thought I would be. This, along with the after effects of playing the talent show, really tipped the scales in favor of drumming full-time over wrestling. I still loved wrestling with all my heart, but there was no way to wrestle anywhere and get good at it. There were no pro wrestling schools or classes in the late 1980s, which meant there was no way to master my craft. I still wrestled periodically in Madison Square Room with my friends, but I really started to focus more than ever on my drums. That same year, Kiss released the video Exposed. This was a mind-blowing, earth-shattering thing because it was the first time since seeing them live in Madison Square Garden that I could watch Kiss in makeup. This time, though, I had the power to play it over and over again. And boy, did I play that video nonstop. Anytime someone came over, I made them watch it. And that goes for friends, relatives, anybody. Now I had the basis of everything I needed. I had the full concert videos, Kiss Animalized Uncensored and Kiss Exposed, showing them in their makeup and all their glory. Even though I spent every waking minute thinking about my drums, because I still had no drum set to practice on, I started to spend a lot more time with my friends and not locked up in my room practicing. This turned out to be a blessing in disguise. My friends and I became inseparable between 6th and 8th grades. Thinking back, I might not have gotten as close to them if I'd had my brand new drum set to play on every day. Like the Rolling Stones said, you can't always get what you want, but sometimes you get what you need. My friend Jason Pierce always had regular sleepovers at his house, and one of our rituals was to put on a concert. The group of girls that we hung out with at the time would come over earlier in the day. Obviously, they weren't sleeping over, and we would essentially put on a full rock concert for them. It was just pretend and lip sync, but it was so much fun. The girls sat on the floor in front of us and yelled their heads off as we performed all the biggest songs on the radio at that time. Bon Jovi's new album, Slippery When Wet, was especially huge, and of course, we always threw in a few Kiss songs. Once again, and I know this sounds silly, but these types of things really shape a kid at this age. This really started to teach me how to perform in front of an audience. It was the perfect scenario. I combined my best friends in the world with the thing I love to do more than anything, perform and play the drums. These goofy things would solidify all our friendship for years to come. After saving for my new drum set for the rest of the year, I'd saved another $400. I was up to $500 now, still a long way off from the $800 that I needed. I had to try to ask for the rest as a combo Christmas and birthday present, so I did. My mom said she couldn't make any promises and said at the very least she would give me more money to put toward the new kit. Christmas came and went, and now it was time for my birthday. I woke up the day of my 14th birthday, and my mom gave me a card with money toward my drums. It was an amazing gift, but left me still short of my target amount. I went to school that day feeling down. It had been more than a year ago since my old set had been broken. I'd been banging around on propped up broken drums for way too long. I started to worry that I wouldn't even remember how to play a real kit anymore. When I returned from school that day, I went straight up to my room to think about how I was going to raise the money for my new drum set. Me and all my friends were on the school basketball team, and there was a basketball game later that night, but I called Scally to tell him that I didn't feel good and I wasn't coming. A few minutes later, Scally called back and my mom answered before I could. I heard her say, "He's not sick and he's coming to the game." I was mad and I yelled, "Why would you tell him that? Now I look like a liar." My mom insisted that I stop sulking and go to the game, so I reluctantly went. Being around my friends did help me feel a little better, and I realized why my mom had made me go. Still, I was a little surprised no one was making a big deal that it was my birthday. A few of my friends nonchalantly said happy birthday, but nothing big. After the game in the locker room, I couldn't find one of my sneakers, and I saw a few kids laughing and knew they must have played a joke. I looked everywhere for about 15 minutes and finally found it in the showers. When I came out of the shower from retrieving my sneaker, almost everyone was gone. My friends and I usually walked home together, so it was a little weird that they left without saying anything, especially on my birthday. I thought it was a little odd. I left the school gym and started to walk home and began to remember why I was down in the first place. I didn't have my new drums. As soon as I walked in my front door, I knew something was up. My front hallway was the place my brother and I always kept our bikes, but now there were about 10 bikes sitting there, and I recognized a few. I walked upstairs to find a giant surprise birthday party waiting for me. I ran over and gave my mom a big hug and told her I was so sorry for being depressed about not getting my drums. She smiled and told me, "Go up to your room for a second, honey." I walked up my stairs with most of my friends trailing behind me. I opened the door to my room to find a brand new drum set waiting for me, fully set up and ready to go. I was speechless. How did she do it? Not only did she afford to get it for me, but how was it all set up so perfectly? It was a dream come true. I had my mom, my brother, Yukon, and all of my friends around me. They shouted and wanted to hear me play. I was a little leery about playing because I hadn't played a real kit in almost 2 years. Also, this kit was massive, or at least seemed that way to me back in 8th grade. It had 4 rack toms, which I'd never even tried before. Still, I couldn't get out of this. They wanted to hear me play, so I said screw it, and jumped behind the kit and started to pound away. It all started to quickly come back to me. I realized I was actually better than before my old kit had broken. Thanks to the time I spent practicing on my broken kit and air drumming with just the sticks, I'd somehow learned more control than I'd ever had before. Plus, it was simply easier to play on an actual kit than an old broken one. Using the bass drum pedal was infinitely easier than kicking the bass drum with my foot while standing. Everyone agreed and thought I sounded great. I think I even saw my mom crying with joy to see how happy I was. She had come through once again for her baby boy. After a month or two of vigorous practicing to Kiss Alive and Kiss Alive 2 on my new kit, I felt I was playing really well. I had both my favorite albums down pat. I loved playing along with all my favorite songs more than anything. I actually think this is the best way for kids to learn and practice drums, since the instrument is about time, feel, and playing what's good for the song. Drums really aren't about chops and how much you can do. I knew if I wanted to get better, I had to start playing with other musicians. The only problem was, I didn't know any other kids who played an instrument.